Chapter 2. A God Among Gods. When Pliny the Younger became governor of Bithynia Pontus around 111 CE, he was responsible for overseeing that law, order, and loyalty were being upheld among its occupants. There was one particularly unfamiliar and strange cult disrupting social order within the region. They called themselves Christiani, and they had quietly threaded their presence across the breadth of Asia Minor. As an unlicensed religion, their movement seemed to cultivate a new class of politically subversive and disloyal followers. Their unsanctioned practices were seen as undermining imperial authority, prompting local citizens to compile lists of individuals suspected of participating in this foreign superstition, notifying regional authorities of their activities. But Pliny was unsure how to handle this unusual situation. These Christians, like other unauthorized cults, were said to have gathered in secret before dawn to avoid detection, singing hymns as if to the gods. They took oaths among themselves and bound themselves to another god, one whom they refused to introduce into Rome's divine pantheon. Rumors circulated about the nature of their gatherings, including accusations of infant cannibalism, and, in later years, the worshipping of a donkey-headed deity. When Pliny interrogated those who insisted they were Christian, he considered them dangerously disobedient and ordered their execution. Those who, when ordered, prayed before the statues of the gods and the emperor's image were permitted to leave. To investigate further into the nature of the assemblies, he had 2 female slaves who described themselves as deaconesses, tortured. After this inquiry, he concluded that Christianity was merely a depraved and excessive superstition. He paused his investigations to consult Trajan, seeking clarification on whether his actions were appropriate and in accordance with imperial policy. Were these Christians a part of some criminal conspiracy? Should they be executed for their disloyalty and refusal to perform civic duty? Most importantly, was Christianity even to be regarded a religion? Trajan, equally perplexed by the situation, responded that they are not to be sought out. If they are accused and convicted, they must be punished. He also stated that any Christian who offered sacrifice to the gods and cursed Christ should be forgiven. The result was a deliberately ambiguous policy. Christianity was not outlawed, but open refusal to participate in imperial cult worship remained a punishable offense. Christians would not be hunted down in their own homes, but those who publicly refused to show loyalty would face consequences. This exchange marked the first recorded Roman policy toward Christianity. The surviving letters provide crucial evidence of Christianity's conflict with Rome's pluralistic religious system. For now, and throughout the 1st and 2nd centuries, Christians practiced their rites in secrecy, laying low from authorities in the privacy of their own homes. Nero's persecution of Christians in 64 CE remains the most notable instance of Christian visibility during the early empire. After a great fire swept across Rome, devastating much of the city, Nero accused the Christians of starting it. However, some sources suggest he blamed them to deflect suspicion from himself as he cleared land for his famous new palace, which became the controversy of imperial times. Regardless of who was to blame, Nero got his palace, and Christians were left with a lasting reputation for disaster, one that lasted for centuries. As Christianity emerged in the eastern provinces during the early 1st century CE, their separation from Judaism became clearer. Roman authorities began to treat Christianity as a distinct and unfamiliar religious presence. During the 1st and 2nd centuries, Christians raised suspicion among Roman authorities as a breeding ground for political subversion. Having its roots in Judea certainly didn't help, a province well known to the Romans for its history of revolts. Consequently, Christianity came to be perceived as a dangerous and foreign conspiracy. By the late 1st century and into the 2nd century CE, the Christians' persistent refusal to participate in civic rites placed them under imperial scrutiny for impiety, leading to sporadic persecutions. Christianity had every reason to be viewed with suspicion during this time. Its ideology was distinctly un-Roman, causing social unrest and instability. Christians disrupted social norms and challenged the traditional expectations of civic duty within Rome. Their monotheistic exclusivity was so strong that they were willing to die for it, rather than acknowledge the existence of the gods and the emperor's divine status. Rome had little tolerance for those who aggravated imperial order, especially individuals viewed as politically subversive rebels with messianic claimants. Jesus, who was promptly handed to Roman authorities by the Jewish elite, was sentenced to death by crucifixion on charges of political treason, refusing to pay taxes, inciting unrest, and proclaiming himself King of the Jews. In Judea, a Roman province, such a title could only be conferred by imperial authority. His self-proclaimed kingship was therefore deemed an unsanctioned, illegitimate, and politically subversive act. For ordinary Romans, the gods were woven in the rhythm of everyday life. They were called upon for aid in matters such as harvest, fortune, or health, and protected and secured every aspect of the ancient world. From household gods, who safeguarded the family and honored the ancestors, to those that governed over agriculture or presided over protection and justice, they were a source of stability to the lower classes as much as they were to the elite. Religious festivals and local rituals offered an opportunity to strengthen communal identity throughout the year. Religion was heavily embedded within Rome's political framework and had been since the Republic. Unfortunately, this also made it vulnerable to corruption, from starving sacred chickens to ensure they peck favorably at the grains of impending warfare, to throwing them overboard if they had refused to consume the seeds of war. One could imagine a floating barrage of defiant chickens upon the Tyrrhenian Sea, deemed as useless pacifists in the eyes of bloodthirsty generals. Needless to say, in this case, discarding the omen led to the worst naval defeat in Roman history. During the imperial period, religion served a greater purpose for ambitious elites. It supported the mechanics of practical politics, allowing emperors to consolidate power and command loyalty. Religious observance became fundamental in the running of a successful empire. So much so that political disloyalty was severely punished. Not only it provided social cohesion, but it legitimized imperial authority across the vast empire and manifested divine favor through civic worship. If the gods were happy, Rome prospered. The state shared unity through ritual, not doctrine. Participation in public rites created social cohesion, regardless of personal belief. Whatever the justifications for the emergence of this new religion within the empire, one fact cast doubt on its welcome. Christianity was failing to integrate into the empire's deeply stratified and polytheistic society. Its exclusivity caused disharmony, undermining pluralism and disrupting civic order. To maintain harmony within the divine realm, foreign gods were readily accepted. That is, if they did not disrupt the political-religious hierarchy. Religious inclusivity ensured that unity was maintained across such a diverse empire. Christianity's strict monotheism struggled against a system which relied upon communal ritual and religious plurality. Roman pluralism worked for so long because it integrated local cults and deities into a shared imperial framework. The state preserved unity through ritual, not the exclusive worship of any single deity. Even Cicero attributes Rome's success to its enduring piety and religious inclusiveness. Christianity may have had the potential to be compatible within Rome's pluralistic system, had it not rejected political traditions. However, their refusal to participate in state-facilitated ritual was not just a display of anti-social nonconformity. It disrupted cosmic and civic hierarchy, upon which Roman religion and imperial authority relied upon. Christians were not the only group targeted by imperial authorities. For example, the cult of Bacchus, which defied the moral values of the Republic, was deemed a threat to state control and suspected of harboring political subversion. In 186 BCE, the Senate issued a decree, the Senatus Consultum Bacchanalibus, which restricted the cult's practices and diminished its influence. Many Romans at this time regarded Christianity's incompatible ideals as a cause for suspicion and insubordination. Their exclusivity, lack of devotion to the state and the emperor, and refusal to perform their civic duty were profoundly un-Roman. Like the Bacchans before them, Christians were viewed as a troublesome cult, disrupting the social and religious norms that structured Roman civic life. Celsus, a 2nd century philosopher, is known only through fragments of his work preserved in Origen's later refutation. He offers valuable insight into how Christianity was perceived by some of its earliest critics outside the faith. Celsus viewed Christianity not merely as a new faith, but as a revolutionary sect capable of destabilizing imperial authority by dismantling its religious foundations. He argued that Christianity's claims to exclusive truth were both intolerant and superstitious, lacking originality as it borrowed heavily from earlier religions and philosophies. He dismissed Christianity as mythical nonsense, directly challenging Rome's cultural and political traditions. He also considered Christian military morale weak and predicted the empire would fall to barbarian forces, a fear that became widespread in the centuries that followed. From a polytheistic perspective, his fears proved justified. Christianity did indeed transform the empire, displacing its traditional gods, redefining sacred traditions inherited from the Republic, and weakening military morale by lacking the Romanly drive for warfare. Over time, the Roman Empire radically evolved as a new religious political order emerged. The 3rd century crisis soon opened an irreparable fracture, creating an opportunity for Christianity to spread unchecked throughout the empire. Social unity became increasingly difficult to maintain amid a multitude of military threats and the devastating plague that decimated the population. Christians once again became the target, as their exclusive monotheism was widely blamed for the cause of divine displeasure. To secure the gods' favor, mandated state sacrifices were imposed across the empire, offering hope that Rome's deepening crisis would be resolved. Disrupting the Pax Deorum. Peace with the gods, Pax Deorum, was a central foundation of Roman religion and politics. The concept functioned as a driving mechanism within daily political and religious life during the imperial period and had been an integral part of Roman governance since the Republic. The Pax Deorum was the Roman belief that a reciprocal relationship existed between the state and the gods. Reciprocal because divine favor was only ensured through correct ritual and piety. In return for their devotion, the gods would grant Rome military success, political stability, and prosperity. However, improper worship or neglect could provoke their displeasure and manifest into disaster in the form of plague, civil unrest, famine, or military defeat. The integration of religion into Roman state politics functioned effectively under Rome's pluralistic framework, that is, until the emergence of Christianity. Christians faced profound challenges under Rome's religious political system, which required communal participation in traditional rites. Their refusal to participate due to their exclusive monotheistic beliefs not only disrupted the Pax Deorum, but threatened the very fabric of Roman civic order. This imbalance in state-divine relations was considered to have contributed to the misfortunes that Rome endured during the 3rd century. Many emperors responded by punishing those who defied imperial order and the Pax Deorum, believing that by doing so, they would restore the delicate balance between state and the divine favor of the gods, on which Rome's prosperity depended. The Imperial Cult. The Imperial Cult served as a state-sanctioned religious institution that reinforced unity and Roman identity, particularly across Rome's diverse provinces. Through the worship of the emperor, a living representative of divine order, the cult demanded loyalty to the state and served as a unifying civic religious practice. The emperor, as Pontifex Maximus, crowned Rome's religious hierarchy. Such titles were powerful ideological tools that reflected the cosmic order of its religious political institutions. The emperor's role as mediator between the divine and mortal realm ensured that the Pax Deorum was maintained. Traditionally, the Pontifex Maximus, was head of the College of Pontiffs, who oversaw religious law and public ritual, safeguarding the Pax Deorum through proper rites. By assuming the role of Pontifex Maximus, the emperor elevated himself to a higher level of prestige, one of supreme political and religious authority, embedding the ideology of divine sanction within political power. Even as Vespasian lay on his own deathbed and jokingly said, "Dear me, I think I'm becoming a god," he revealed a self-aware expectation of imperial tradition, humoring the fact of deification after death. Since then, the imperial cult had increasingly been used to portray the emperor as a protector of the world, divinely appointed by the gods as a savior to the empire and humankind, a system that functioned as a political loyalty test. However, during the 3rd century crisis, emperors such as Decius turned their attention toward Christian communities, blaming them for disrupting the Pax Deorum. Their refusal to participate in imperial cult practices to secure the gods' favor and the emperor's divine well-being was seen as a violation of public duty. This non-compliance fractured the social and religious cohesion essential to upholding political order. In doing so, their rejection of cult worship not only demonstrated disloyalty to the gods, but also to the emperor, thereby undermining the ideological foundations of imperial authority. The imperial cult evolved significantly from Augustus's time all the way through the 3rd century. While the principle of emperor worship as a religious political expression of loyalty remained intact, the imperial cult became increasingly centralized, especially as the empire faced internal and external crises. Augustus famously refused divine honors during his lifetime, fashioning his identity as princeps, the first citizen, and maintaining the facade of republican tradition. However, as the empire progressed, emperor worship became further entrenched as a pillar of loyalty. Key differences in state religious practice between the Republic and Imperial Rome reflect the evolution of religion, as it became increasingly integrated into politics through the individual authority of the emperor, positioning his identity within a divine hierarchy. During the Republic, religion was a shared civic duty, administered across multiple offices, pontifices, augurs, haruspices, among others, and was, in many ways, an arena for aristocratic competition. In contrast, under the empire, religion evolved into a state-controlled system that emphasized loyalty, particularly through the imperial cult. As religious worship became increasingly centralized around the emperor, temples and priesthoods in his honor were constructed. Even under Christian emperors, the imperial cult was radically transformed but continued to serve as a unifying ideological force across a vast and diverse empire, promoting loyalty and cohesion. Constantine would be the first emperor to integrate imperial authority with Christian ideology, portraying his rule as divinely sanctioned and positioning himself as a central figure in the imperial administration of Christian religious life. He would inherit an empire embedded in traditional Roman religion and initially maintained the imperial cult's formal structure to avoid alienating the predominantly polytheist population within this transitional phase. This continuity was crucial to maintaining the Pax Deorum and ensuring political stability as the empire began its gradual religious transition. The cult continued to be redefined under Christian rulers as it was already a well-established institution. Rejection of this imperial device would not have served as a wise move, even if its roots were firmly embedded in emperor worship. Christian rituals and symbols would eventually gain prominence over religious life, gradually displacing the traditional festivals, rites, and state-sponsored sacrifices that once fashioned Roman identity. Polytheistic emperors reinforced their divine authority and control over religious life, while Christian emperors adopted the political mechanisms of the imperial cult, such as centralized loyalty and the role of a divinely sanctioned mediator between God and the populace, but no longer endorsed its polytheist rituals. While civic authorities like Pliny and emperors such as Decius struggled to accommodate Christianity into Rome's pluralistic framework, It was only a matter of time before one of the most violent and ruthless persecutions in Roman history followed. The ruler behind this bloody persecution would also be widely credited with bringing an end to the 3rd century crisis. His transformative reign redefined imperial authority and reshaped the political and administrative landscape, paving the way for Constantine's rise to power and the Christianization of the empire.